My name is Gillian Tachibana. I'm Director for Global eMedia at Merck Serono SA in Geneva. We are the biopharmaceuticals division of Merck KGaA in Darmstadt, Germany. Here in the US, we are called EMD Serono, so as not to confuse us with Merck & Co., which is the US pharmaceuticals company, a distant cousin of ours, but with no legal relation to us. So today I was asked to speak about, from the European point of view, the e-communications and online marketing, perhaps to bridge a gap in the understanding of why new technology campaigns tend to spread faster in the US rather than in Europe or the rest of the world. So the goals for my presentation today will be to, in a nutshell, identify the major challenges and risks facing global pharmaceutical companies, explain why Merck Serono is particularly concentrating on inward-facing Web 2.0, which is also called Enterprise 2.0, explain a few of the cultural and social obstacles with regard to organizational structure and change management, and how we're educating our employees globally about social medias and networking in collaborative environments. But before I move on, can I see a show of hands of how many of you are US affiliates reporting into European headquarters? Okay, so not that many, but pretty a significant number. And how many of you are US headquarters with a significant European presence? Okay. Being from a European headquarters myself, I tend to get the feedback and comments that corporate knows nothing about the internet. Corporate knows nothing about the social medias, and we're always saying no to your projects. So we tend to slow down the decision-making process, of course, and I'm guilty of that as myself. But I hope to explain some of those cultural and regulatory influences on how the old world approaches new technologies. So over the past 5 years, Web 1.0 has evolved from a more structured and controlled environment of mostly one-way communications. Externally, social medias have put the customer in more of control of the conversation, and likewise, internally, the employee becomes the vector of communications, more active contributor in information sharing. So in Europe, or as the communication landscape changes, into allowing everyone and anyone to have a voice. In the enterprise, we've also noted a convergence of the classic roles of communications and marketing joining together. So in Europe, we've understood that to participate in the conversation for external-facing Web 2.0, we need to also acknowledge the empowerment given to the consumer. However, the major challenges that the European pharmaceutical has to face is that DTC is simply forbidden. This leads us to investigate different ways how to listen and filter online chatter. So in general, companies have many opportunities with the advent of social medias, this you know, yet these opportunities presented to the pharmaceutical industry doesn't come without a number of challenges. As I've said, in Europe, where direct-to-consumer communications is strictly regulated, if not forbidden, it's difficult to sway our executive management into investing time, resources, and money into the rapidly evolving medium that's little understood by those who grant our budgets. Apart from the usual internal challenges why we should invest in new technologies, there's also the external factors that slow down our internal decision-making process. But both internally and externally, we're challenged by policy to justify the number of what-if scenarios. And one of the biggest what-if scenarios that we're faced with is, for example, adverse event reporting. So as you have already known from my colleague David Stern in his presentation, the social medias have shifted the trust and confidence of the consumer to trust those posts and opinions of their peers online, rather than to trust the promotional messages of the pharmaceutical company. According to the findings of the Nielsen Group, some 500 messages regarding pharmaceutical products and treatments were analyzed on the social media platforms of Google and Yahoo. 1 in 500 posts required adverse event reporting to local regulatory authorities. Now, in most countries in Europe, and I believe also in the United States, pharmaceutical companies that are engaging in social media or provide social media platforms are required to report these adverse events. Now, depending on the angle that you see this from, there's both a positive and negative aspect to this. Positively, of course, if we could capture the negative feedback on a product or a treatment early on, we could act quickly to, for example, improve the safety profile of a drug. Negatively, and this is where the pharmaceutical executives tend to lean towards, is that we are very much aware of the lawyers and the legal groups that are scanning the web looking for such class action or potential class action suits. So pharmaceutical executives tend to be a little more conservative as we weigh the interests of the other stakeholders other than just the consumers. We also look at the investors and our competitors as well. From a corporate communications and a legal point of view, we also need to manage the reputation and as well damage control if there is an ensuing class action suit. So I'm not suggesting that we keep our heads in the sand, and that if we hope to avoid all of this. However, I think you have to admit that there is something rather intimidating about the use of external-facing social medias. Now, as far as the Merck Serono division is concerned, we have turned the use of social medias inward in order to reckon the forces of new medias. This is by harnessing the collective voice of the employee to foster notions of transparency and innovation. I'm not just talking about providing content for the classic intranet, rather it's providing a platform for our employees to participate in two-way communications on our company's strategy and business approach, something that would allow employees to take charge in crowdsourcing by driving conversations in their own communities, for example. Collaborative applications would give users the control over their own data and democratic discussions on best practice. And data-oriented architectures would allow for more web-based applications to connect to each other, allowing employees to generate mashup reports from different data resources without having to involve IT or the business application owners. So this is easy access to knowledge bases without having to wait for hierarchical approvals. So what exactly is Web 2.0? Because it sounds to me, and it sounds to a lot of people, that it's just Enterprise 2.0 is Web 2.0 just behind the firewall. Well, it's pretty much the same idea, though it's leaning more towards the collaboration and networking inside of the company and working with our employees closely to understand what the temperature is. So moving from Enterprise 1.0, which is the hierarchical structure, to the Enterprise 2.0, it's not just a technological phenomenon, but it's a social one, and this we recognize. So it's about getting silos to collaborate. It's also about taking the collective thinking to a different level and banding together those groups that would support and benefit, for example, CRM processes. A network of employees with a common goal together become the power structure that bring innovation to different facets of customer relation or partner relationship management. So this is giving a new meaning to being stronger in numbers. So in rethinking the enterprise architecture, we are in the process of streamlining our processes and accesses to information by giving our employees a common and scalable working environment from which they can pool their resources. Now, this sounds great in an ideal world if we could entirely abolish the silos and the personalities of people who resist sharing information. Remembering just 20 years ago, we've been saying that knowledge is power. This has been particularly abused by people who tend to build segmented teams that keep key information for themselves. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that the Enterprise 2.0 would entirely remediate this kind of thinking, but of course it would be a lot more difficult for these kind of groups and individuals to continue to survive in a collaborative environment. Now, as I mentioned, the role of the communicator expands into different facets across the business. The 2.0 enterprise is not, of course, without its own challenges. There's challenges inside, there's challenges outside. The HR departments and our compliance officers are having to also rethink the overall responsibility of the employee within the framework of codes of conduct. How to communicate within a multicultural environment, and also what constitutes business critical information that in fact should not be shared.